There is a silent belief that has crossed centuries and shaped almost all of modern human experience. The idea that if something is not working, the solution is to try harder. More discipline, more control, more effort. This logic appears noble, responsible, even mature. It is taught in schools, celebrated in organizations, and often glorified on spiritual paths disguised as willpower or determination. But what if this logic is incomplete? What if, at certain levels of reality, trying harder does not help, but becomes precisely the mechanism that keeps you trapped? Today, we explore a deep, uncomfortable, and at the same time liberating idea. An idea that appears symbolically in the teachings attributed to Thoth, is observable in modern neuroscience, and finds surprising parallels in contemporary physics. Excessive effort arises from inner misalignment, not from power. It is important to be clear from the beginning. Thoth, as a literal historical figure, is surrounded by layers of myth, symbolism, and oral tradition. There is no academic consensus that he existed as a single individual in the way ancient texts describe. However, the principles attributed to him, especially in the Hermetic writings, function as symbolic maps of consciousness, not factual biographies. When we speak of Thoth here, we are speaking of an archetype of knowledge, an ancient language attempting to describe universal laws of mind and reality. Likewise, when we speak of quantum physics or neuroscience, we will clearly distinguish between what is scientifically verifiable and what is modern interpretation applied to consciousness studies. The goal is not to mix science and mysticism naively, but to build legitimate bridges of understanding. As we move forward, you may notice something subtle. Constant effort is not a sign of inner alignment. Often it is a sign of internal conflict, and internal conflict generates noise. Noise distorts perception. Distorted perception creates realities that seem to require even more effort. This is the invisible cycle many spiritually aware people face without understanding why. If you feel you are always almost there, always adjusting, always pushing toward a breakthrough that never fully stabilizes, this message was created for you, not to give you another technique, but to remove an interference. Before we continue, I invite you consciously, subscribe to this channel and anchor your presence here, not as a mechanical gesture, but as a symbolic act. When you commit to content that expands perception, you signal to your own nervous system that a new internal organization is possible. Liking, commenting, and sharing are not just digital metrics. They are small acts of coherence that help sustain a collective field of clearer awareness. Later, we will explore how even these seemingly simple actions influence inner states and the surrounding field. For now, allow yourself to listen without trying to agree or disagree. Simply observe. Because, as we will see, the way you observe is already shaping what you experience. As we move forward, it is essential to dismantle a very common confusion: the idea that effort and power are the same. In most modern cultures, effort is treated as a moral virtue. Those who struggle deserve. Those who rest too much are seen as failing. This conditioning runs so deep that many people do not realize when effort becomes their identity rather than a tool. In the Hermetic teachings attributed to Thoth, again understood here as symbolic knowledge rather than literal historical record, there is a clear distinction between acting from the lower mind and operating from higher states of consciousness. The lower mind is not wrong or negative. It is functional, focused on survival, control, and predictability. The problem arises when it attempts to govern processes that belong to broader levels of reality. The lower mind operates from lack. It assumes something is missing now and must be obtained in the future. From this assumption, excessive effort is born. The individual moves not from alignment, but from fear of not arriving. This fear is rarely conscious. It disguises itself as ambition, discipline, or even spirituality. But at its core, it is tension. Symbolically, Thoth describes that true creative power does not respond to tension, but to coherence. Coherence occurs when thought, emotion, and bodily state are not in conflict. When you try to force change while internally doubting, fearing, or feeling inadequate, you create interference. Action happens, but the inner field remains fragmented. Here we encounter a crucial point that we will later explore through neuroscience. The human system does not respond to declared intention, but to the dominant internal state. You may say you want peace, abundance, or clarity, but if your inner state is constant urgency, the body and brain interpret that as threat. Perceived reality organizes itself around that signal. Observe people who live in constant effort. They are always doing, yet rarely feel stable. When they achieve something, another goal quickly appears. Not because the universe is hostile, but because the internal state that produces effort also produces dissatisfaction. The lower mind never arrives. It only moves. This is why many spiritual paths fail when treated as aggressive self-improvement projects. Meditating to fix yourself, manifesting to prove worth, studying to finally be enough, all maintain the same internal pattern of inadequacy. The content changes, but the state remains. Later, we will see how this pattern becomes biologically embedded in the brain and nervous system. For now, it is enough to recognize something simple and profound. When action arises from tension, it reinforces the very tension you are trying to resolve. You may recognize this in your own life. The more you try to control certain outcomes, the more rigid everything feels. The more you pressure yourself to evolve, the further peace seems. This is not personal failure, it is internal mechanics. Allow yourself to reflect. In which areas of your life has effort replaced presence? Where are you trying to compensate internally for something you believe is missing? Do not answer now. Simply observe. Honest observation already begins to dissolve patterns. And if this message resonates, make a small, conscious gesture. Like the video or leave a brief comment, even a single word. Not out of obligation, but as anchoring. These gestures help stabilize attention, and as we will see later, attention is directly linked to how reality organizes itself around you. There comes a point where this understanding stops being merely philosophical and becomes clearly observable in how the human brain functions. Here, science and spirituality begin to dialogue honestly, without exaggeration or magical promises. Modern neuroscience is very clear on one fundamental point. The brain does not interpret the world objectively. It responds to internal states. This is not a spiritual opinion. It is scientific observation. The brain is primarily a predictive organ. It anticipates threats, minimizes risks, and tries to keep the organism alive. When you live in constant effort, the brain does not interpret this as dedication. It interprets it as continuous pressure. Continuous pressure for the nervous system equals danger. When this state persists, the body enters survival modes. Stress hormones become dominant. Areas of the brain related to creativity, empathy, and long-term vision reduce activity, while more primitive circuits take control. The person continues functioning, but in a narrow, reactive, predictable way. Not because they are incapable of more, but because the organism does not feel safe enough to relax. Here lies the irony. Many spiritually awakened people try to evolve from this very state of alert. They meditate while tense, study with urgency, attempt to manifest while fearing failure. Then they wonder why everything feels so difficult, even when doing the right things. What is rarely said, and what the symbolic teachings attributed to Thoth point to with precision, is that reality responds to the dominant state, not to the conscious narrative. You may repeat positive affirmations, but if the body remains in alert, the primary message sent to the system is, something is wrong. And perceived reality begins to reflect exactly that. Later, we will explore in depth the role of the observer and how the quality of attention interferes with lived processes. For now, it is enough to understand that excessive effort is not neutral. It biologically shapes the observer. There is an important distinction here. This is not about action. Action is natural, healthy, and necessary. This is about action charged with psychological urgency. Action born from the belief that if you stop, something bad will happen. That kind of action does not expand, it contracts. You may recall moments when something important happened without forced effort. A meeting, an idea, an opportunity that arose when you were more present, more relaxed, less obsessed. This is not mystical coincidence, it is system coherence. When the internal state changes, the perceived field of possibilities expands. You notice more signals, make more creative connections, and respond with greater emotional intelligence. Not because the universe decided to help, but because you stopped interfering. This is why trying harder often produces the opposite effect. You reduce the spectrum of possible responses. You insist on familiar paths because they feel safer. And for a brain in alert, safety equals repetition, even if that repetition is frustrating. Observe honestly, how many times have you repeated patterns not because you believed in them, but because they were familiar? How many decisions were made not from clarity, but from fear of not deciding? This is the field where effort disguises itself as responsibility. If at any moment you feel resistance while hearing this, simply notice it. Resistance is information. It shows where the system still associates relaxation with danger and control with safety. There is nothing to fix right now. Observation alone already begins to reorganize the inner field. At some point along this journey, an inevitable question arises. If excessive effort creates interference, if internal tension limits perception, and if the brain responds more to state than intention, then what truly shapes lived reality? Here we enter a delicate territory, often misunderstood, especially when quantum physics is discussed outside academic environments. It is important to be honest. Quantum physics, as a formal science, does not claim that thoughts create reality in a literal sense. What it demonstrates in a verifiable way is something more subtle. The act of observation influences the observed system. This principle, known as the observer effect, does not mean the human mind controls particles at will, but it does indicate that no observation is neutral. Every observation carries context, and context includes expectation, attention, emotional state, and even the observer's level of internal coherence. When this idea is applied to everyday human experience, as some modern interpretations do, it should not be understood as mental magic, but as the impact of perception on choices, micro-decisions, and interpretations of reality. An observer in tension perceives fewer options. An observer in presence perceives nuance. This does not directly alter the physical universe at a quantum scale, but it profoundly alters the range of possible responses within human experience. This is where many people become confused when trying to manifest. The attempt is loaded with rigid expectation. Rigid expectation generates anticipatory frustration. Frustration creates more tension, and the perceptual field narrows even further. The person begins to notice only evidence of delay, blockage, or failure, not because these are absolute truths, but because perception is filtering reality through a contracted state. In the Hermetic texts attributed to Thoth, this appears symbolically through references to veils, illusions, and levels of mind, not as divine punishment, but as a natural consequence of consciousness state. The lower mind sees fragments, the broader mind perceives patterns. Later, we will explore how to exit this state without denying reality or forcing optimism. For now, it is important to understand that excessive effort does not only exhaust, it becomes addictive. It creates a sense of control. And control, for an insecure system, feels safer than presence. Presence requires openness. Openness requires tolerating not knowing, and not knowing for a conditioned mind feels dangerous. So it prefers to struggle, even if the struggle leads nowhere. You may notice this in small things. Difficulty resting without guilt, constant need to be doing something, the feeling that if you relax, everything will collapse. This is not intuition. It is conditioning. Here we introduce something that will be explored more deeply later. True expansion begins when effort stops being the driving force and becomes a natural consequence of clarity. Action still exists, but it is no longer born from urgency. It is born from alignment. Before moving on, allow yourself a brief internal pause. Not to agree or disagree, simply to feel. If something in you relaxes as you hear this, that response is more informative than any logical argument. There is a specific moment when this understanding stops being purely intellectual and begins to touch something deeper. When one realizes that excessive effort is not just a habit, it is an unconscious attempt to protect oneself from uncertainty. Modern humans have been trained to associate value with predictability, planning, anticipating, controlling. This works reasonably well in mechanical systems, but fails when applied to life as a whole. Life is a complex, non-linear system, sensitive to small variations of state. When we try to treat it like a machine, we use force where sensitivity is required. In Hermetic teachings, this appears as the difference between operating from the outside in and from the inside out. Operating from the outside in means trying to adjust circumstances in the hope that the inner state will eventually follow. Operating from the inside out means reorganizing the inner state and allowing circumstances to reorganize as a consequence. This is not a mystical promise, it is a functional description. Contemporary psychology offers a clear parallel. People who live in chronic, rigid self-control tend to experience higher anxiety, lower cognitive flexibility, and greater difficulty dealing with unexpected change. Excessive control does not generate real safety, it generates fragility. A single variable outside the plan can cause the entire internal system to collapse. Here, effort reveals itself as a substitute for trust. Not trust in the naive sense of everything will be fine, but trust in the internal system's ability to respond intelligently to what arises. When this trust is absent, individuals compensate with force. They anticipate too much, explain too much, pressure themselves too much. They live several steps ahead of the present. Thoth, as an archetype of knowledge, points to something essential. Power does not reside in anticipation, but in lucid presence. A mind that tries to predict everything moves away from now, and it is in the now that real information is available. Outside of now, there are only mental simulations, many of them fear-based. You may recognize this in rushed decisions, automatic responses, choices made to relieve immediate anxiety but that generate complications later. This is not a lack of intelligence. It is excessive mental interference. Later, we will explore how to interrupt this pattern without falling into passivity. For now, it is important to be clear. Releasing excessive effort does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means abandoning internal war. There is a subtle yet decisive difference between discipline and rigidity. Discipline is born of clarity. Rigidity is born of fear. Externally, they may look similar. Internally, they generate completely different realities. If you feel this message beginning to reorganize something within you, simply allow it. Do not try to apply anything yet. The mind that rushes to do immediately is the same mind we are learning to observe with greater gentleness. We now reach a decisive point of understanding, realizing that the greatest trap of effort is not exhaustion, but the identity built around it. Many people are not just making effort, they are being someone who makes effort. Effort becomes proof of worth, an internal argument, the automatic response to any existential discomfort. When something does not work, the question is not, what is misaligned, but how can I try harder? This pattern is so normalized that it is rarely questioned. The problem is that identities are stable structures, and every stable structure tends to preserve itself. When you identify with struggle, the internal system begins to seek situations that justify that identity, not consciously, but through coherence. The human mind prefers coherence over happiness. It prefers being right over being free. This explains why some people feel a strange emptiness when things finally begin to flow. Without constant effort, without internal drama, without tension, something feels missing. It is not the problem that is missed. It is the identity built around it. In the symbolic teachings attributed to Thoth, this appears as the idea of veils, not as punishments, but as layers of identification. Each veil is a belief about who you need to be in order to exist safely. The veil of effort says, if I am not trying, I am not enough. While this belief operates, rest feels dangerous and simplicity feels suspicious. Modern psychology describes something similar when discussing patterns of self-validation. People who learned early that recognition only comes through performance tend to confuse effort with love, tension with belonging, productivity with identity. They do not know how to simply be. They need to justify their existence. This is where misunderstood spirituality can become yet another layer of effort. One tries to be more conscious, more elevated, less egoic, but does so using the same internal mechanism of pressure and comparison. The ego does not disappear, it simply changes costume. Later, we will explore how true expansion of consciousness does not require destroying identity, but softening it. For now, notice something simple. Anything that requires constant force to sustain itself is not in balance. Balance maintains itself through subtle adjustments, not continuous tension. You may recognize this in relationships, jobs, projects, or even spiritual practices that require permanent effort just to avoid collapse. This is not healthy dedication, it is compensation. When the internal state begins to reorganize, something curious happens. Certain things simply fall away. Not because you gave up, but because they cannot sustain themselves without the old effort. And this can generate fear. The mind asks, if I do not struggle, who am I? This question does not need an immediate answer. It needs space. It is in that space that something new can emerge. Not a new rigid identity, but a more stable presence. And presence, as we will see, is the true leverage point of reality. If at any moment you feel the impulse to slow your breathing, release your shoulders, or simply pause for a few seconds, allow it. The body understands before the mind, and the body does not lie. There comes a moment when inner alignment stops being an idea and begins to become a lived practice. And this practice does not require complex rituals, long techniques, or more effort. It begins with something simple yet profound, the way you choose to register an inner decision. When you consciously verbalize something, whether out loud or by writing, you are not just saying words. You are organizing your internal field. Language, attention, and intention begin to move in the same direction. This is not empty mysticism. Neuroscience shows that naming a decision reduces mental noise and stabilizes internal states. Ancient spiritual traditions understood this long before we had scientific instruments to measure it. That is why, when I invite you to leave a comment or to register a phrase, it is not about mechanical engagement. It is because the act of registering anchors the choice in your system. It transforms an abstract understanding into a lived signal. So listen to this with presence, not as something to analyze, but as an internal instruction. The affirmations you choose to register, whether here in the comments or privately, are more than words. They function as vibrational codes. When you consciously repeat a choice, you create a circuit that reorganizes the mind and anchors a new experiential timeline in your field. This is not about convincing the universe. It is about aligning your own system. Repetition transforms vibration into identity, and identity reorganizes perception, decisions, and responses. If in this moment it feels aligned for you, register, simply without effort, this phrase, either here or for yourself. I consciously choose the frequency that creates my world. Not as a promise, not as an attempt, just as a choice. Repeat this phrase in the coming days, silently or softly, the way one tunes a fine instrument. Because each time this choice is reaffirmed without tension, the system moves into coherence. And when there is coherence, what no longer resonates begins to dissolve on its own, without struggle, without force, without internal war. This kind of movement rarely draws external attention, but it deeply shifts the internal trajectory. And as we will see next, it is always the internal trajectory that determines the timeline that manifests externally. What we have explored here is not a technique, a belief system, or a new philosophy to adopt. It is a shift in orientation, a movement away from force and toward coherence. Throughout this journey, one central insight has quietly repeated itself in different forms. Trying harder is often not an expression of power, but a signal of inner conflict. Excessive effort emerges when the system feels unsafe, when identity is tied to struggle, when control replaces presence. And while this strategy may keep things moving, it rarely allows anything truly new to emerge. The symbolic teachings attributed to Thoth point to this with precision. Power is not exerted, it is allowed. Creation does not respond to tension, but to alignment. Science, in its own language, confirms the same principle. The nervous system, the brain, and perception itself reorganize reality based on dominant internal states, not declared intentions. This is why forcing change often stabilizes the very patterns one is trying to escape. Effort narrows perception. Tension reduces available choices. Identity built around struggle seeks situations that justify struggle. And so the loop continues, not because life is against you, but because the internal signal has not yet changed. The way out is not collapse, passivity, or denial of reality. It is clarity without urgency, action without internal war, presence without the need to prove anything. When effort drops, intelligence rises. When control softens, perception widens. When identity loosens, coherence emerges. From that state, action still happens, but it is cleaner. Decisions still occur, but they require less justification. Life does not become perfect, but it becomes more responsive, less reactive, more precise. If there is one practical takeaway from all of this, let it be simple. Before trying to change outcomes, check the state from which you are acting. Before forcing a decision, pause and sense whether tension is driving it. Before adding more effort, consider whether alignment is what is actually missing. And remember, the most powerful shifts rarely look dramatic from the outside. They happen quietly, internally, when the system stops fighting itself. I'll leave you with this final invitation. If this message resonated with you, share it. Help expand this field of consciousness, because every person who awakens illuminates hundreds of others. Leave your comment, your vibration, your lived insight, not for engagement alone, but because your energy is part of this collective construction. And remember, the highest timeline is not a place in the future. It is a state of being available here and now. May you walk in peace, in clarity, and in love. Until the next awakening, stay present, stay coherent, and let what no longer requires effort begin to fall away naturally.